Okay, I was gonna talk about the 520 gyro wire and what I do to try to reduce the amount of wire. And essentially what I do is I get rid of the black and red wire. They're not necessary. All you need is the white wire, and then I cut the white wire and splice it in the middle, so the whole connector is about 4 inches long, and that's really all you need. So the way I do that is I'll pull the pins on the black and the black and the red wire, and I'll just strip it off with the white wire.
Then I'll cut the whole thing about 2 inches long or so.
I'll strip it back. I like a good 1/4 inch of exposed wire. Put on some heat shrink. I kind of do this method on this particular splice where I let them intertwine, and then I twist them together. You get a really nice.
You can do it with a single braided wire
real easily. A little extra flux never hurts.
Just melt that solder so you can see it suck into the wire.
Nice solder joint all the way around. Put your heat shrink over and shrink it. And I'll do that to all 6 of them, and it reduces a ton of wire. Now on the end that connects to the my Rotormast controller, we can't have these little nubs, these Futaba nubs. So I'll just dike those off of there. And then I'll just clean it up with this X-Acto knife. I'll leave the other end. The other end will plug into the, and you'll get a nice, JR style on this end and the Futaba on this end, and just one single white wire. So I'll do that to every single, all 6 2 per gyro of these extension wires, and that'll really clean up my installation. Hey, while I'm doing that, I just wanted to mention a couple things I've heard people do. It seems to be very common is that they hook up the control system backwards. I've seen this on more than one occasion. Essentially, what you have to keep in mind is the servo that I call the forward servo, the front servo, it goes up to a double arm, which is on the other side or the back side of the aircraft. And it goes across the aircraft to the single arm through the torque tube. And that single arm connects up to the back side of the swash plate. So essentially the front servo moves the back swash plate up and down, and the back servo moves the front of the swash plate up and down. So I've seen that hooked up backwards on a lot of occasions. I've seen it hooked up right on one side and then backwards on the other side. And you may get all the Rotormast settings such that it works in helicopter mode, because I give you a lot of rope to hang yourself with, but if something's backwards, there's a really good chance it's not going to convert right, and the controls are going to go backwards in airplane mode, and you're going to crash. So, there's a couple safety nuts there. One being all the pictures I give you, and the other being that I ask people to, verify their controls both in helicopter mode and in airplane mode before you go fly. But people don't seem to want to take the time to do that, and you end up with some aircraft that just won't fly. So take the time, make sure your controls are set up right, and then take the time to double check them before you go fly. And the other thing, I get a bunch of emails from guys that aren't flying in heading hole mode, and you want to fly in heading hole mode. The ship just flies a heck of a lot better. It's more stable, it's more controllable, and it kind of just wants to hang out. And if you don't fly in heading hole mode, it's going to kind of wobble around a little bit. Now, when you fly in heading hole mode, you don't mess with any of your trims. So all your trims should be left at 0, and you should never have to trim the aircraft, because the trim kind of happens on the ground when you set the aircraft up. So or when the aircraft initializes and it knows what 0 rate is, and it'll try to hold that. So those are probably the biggest screw ups I've seen to make the ship just not want to fly at all. I was trying to think of some other issues people have had. Some people don't take the time to adjust or don't know how to adjust the conversion servo, the rack gear on the conversion servo. So what you want there is that little backup arm to push that rack gear into the gear that's on the servo, with just a little bit of backlash. A definitely perceivable amount of backlash, but not a lot. And then you want to move that servo by hand, that rack gear by hand, through the entire conversion range, and make sure it doesn't bind at any one location. I've had a couple people say they've burnt conversion servos up, and I know that's how they're doing it, is that's not set properly, and they're binding that servo, and that servo can burn itself out if it gets too much load on it. So just make sure you set that right. Now the pot gear, that wants to be under a little bit of compression, so you don't want any slop in that gear. You want that to be nice and tight, so the pot's following the servo or the nacelle exactly, and that'll make that setup run a lot smoother. I can't think of anything else people are really having problems with. Well, I'll finish this up. No sense around the video this entire time. And hope you guys have some luck out there. I did make a change on the last rack gear I built, which I like a little bit better. I'll show you why I got you here. But there's been some complaints about people not being able to get all the way into airplane mode. So I wanted to extend the range of travel, and there's usually a head of a screw right here. But there's an extra countersunk screw, a real small countersunk screw that's in this pack. And I actually, on this last hole where I take the wood screw and screw it down, which isn't a very nice installation anyway because it hits this post that's in there, kind of doesn't work real well. On the back side of this hole, I countersunk this hole, and then I stuck this countersunk screw just up through the hole. And it's not threaded in there or anything, it's just stuck up there. And that makes this stop a lot smaller, so I should get a little more travel out of this before I hit that screw. Then I also mention it, and I might have go a little bit farther this time, but cutting this servo arm flat. So I cut that taper off of it where it comes to a point. You want to cut it nice and flat so it gets a lot of surface area pushing up against that rack gear. And that I think was going to really get me a little more travel, and it's actually a much nicer installation. That other screw, when you screwed it in here, if you weren't real careful, it would pry this board off, the stiffener backing board off the gear, and then so this would be wider here. So because it got wider here, it would kind of start jamming up as you got down into this deep conversion. So just give that a try. This is about how much slop you want. You can feel it on this backup arm. If you don't have this much slop, or you really shouldn't be hearing it grabbing, or if you have too much slop, you have to loosen this screw here and then either tighten or loosen this adjustment screw right here. Now if you loosen it, then you want to push this hard both ways, and that'll push this screw here that way that you've loosened. Then after you get it right again, you want to tighten this up. But you have to check it every time after you tighten up this screw to make sure it doesn't get tighter as that arm straightens. And that's a good installation as far as the slop is concerned. Now I go through in that manual that you want to adjust the thickness of these two washers that are between this arm. And you can see this one, there's almost no side-to-side slop there, so that adjusts it out pretty good. The only other thing we do a little bit different, which I mentioned in the instructions, I add a beauty washer. There's a big diameter washer that comes in the kit, and then over the top of that big diameter washer, I add a beauty washer to help keep it kind of stay flat. That's really the only tricks on this particular wingtip. We also ask that you, I haven't done it yet on this, that you trim the corner of this servo arm off here to make clearance for your conversion fairing when that goes on. Anyway, I'll get back to soldering these wires up.